Someone who might be able to answer my questions and shine a bit of light on it is Marcus Solarz Hendriks. He is the head of the National Security Unit at Policy Exchange. Marcus, this just kind of, a couple of months ago popped up out of nowhere. All of a sudden it was decided, by the way, we're giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, and we signed a deal to also give Mauritius millions of pounds so we can keep a base on there. And everyone went, you what? What? How did we get to that point?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's a very good question. As Policy Exchange in our report released today says, there was never a good reason for striking this deal with Mauritius. The Labour government rushed in. It built on the back of the Conservatives who opened negotiations a year ago, but crucially didn't agree to the conditions put on them by Mauritius. But Labour's come in, and it's seen what is actually an issue of dynamic strategic risk, juggling the pressure that was coming from the Mauritians, but ultimately remaining completely focused on the fact that this is a crucial, as you say, strategic asset in the region. But it's incorrectly perceived this to be an issue of legal compliance. It's taken the International Court of Justice's non-binding legal opinion issued in 2019, and it's interpreted this as something that it needs to do because of international law. However, as you rightly say, what it's really doing, it's an unforced error. It's going to deeply trouble our relationship probably with the incoming Trump administration, and it's going to quite likely harm our national security and our strategic interests if the deal does indeed go ahead.
So I know that, the Conservative government opened up these negotiations, but why? I don't understand. When Mauritius is nowhere near the Chagos Islands, if someone can explain to me why all of a sudden it was decided that we're going to give these to another country who's nowhere even near. I'd understand if these were islands just off the coast of Mauritius, that Mauritius might go, well, that's our territorial water. It's about time we add that back. I just don't understand what the claim even is.
Well, sure, you're quite right. And it's worth mentioning, as you say, that it's thousands of kilometres away from Mauritius. It's actually much closer to the Maldives. When we look at the reasons for why the Conservatives might have opened it, there was the ICJ ruling, there was this sense of building pressure, the international community, there was a vote in the UN General Assembly, lots of countries voted for it, but the crucial issue remains this is a non-binding opinion. So the Conservatives, as I said, they treated this as an issue of political dynamic risk, a situation to be managed. They went through 10 rounds of negotiations. They said that red lines weren't met, so therefore they weren't going to strike the deal. However, Labour's come into government. It's thought that it can't sustain this international pressure. It has different views when it comes to international law that the previous government did, and it's made poor judgment. But as we said in our report, these developments since, not least the Trump administration, not least the fact that the new Mauritian government has tried to reopen negotiations to extract more cash from the British taxpayer than it already was receiving, estimated to be about 9 billion or something over the 99 years of the lease agreement. This gives a brilliant get-out-of-free-jail card to the British government now to accept it made a mistake and withdraw legitimately and with grace from the agreement before it's too late.
I've got a bit of breaking news, by the way, and I'm going to ask you about this. Sorry to throw this curveball at you, Marcus, but I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this. The breaking news is apparently Britain's gas storage levels are concerningly low. Ooh, right on the coldest day of the year, with less than a week of demand in store, the operator of the country's largest gas storage site said today. Plunging temperatures and high demand for gas-fired power stations are the main factors behind the low levels. That's according to Centrica. The UK is heavily reliant on gas for its home heating and also uses a significant amount for electricity generation. Now, I remember last winter, Marcus, and not a lot was being made of this publicly, but we got into a pretty sticky situation again when it came to how much gas we had in the UK, and we went cap in hand over to Qatar for their LNG. Do you think Rachel Reeves might have to divert her flight to China via Doha?
Well, I mean, let's see. She's indeed been very keen to go to Beijing, so I'm sure that her interests for this weekend lie there. But look, when it comes to energy, this has been a long-standing issue going through a number of British governments when it comes to their energy strategy. You can look at nuclear, for example, decisions that were made which may have come to our rescue now. Whether or not Labour can get it together and have a much stronger energy strategy, much stronger, may I say, than the current one that they're pursuing when it comes to national security in the Indian Ocean, remains to be seen. But yes, no.
I think we've seen it already. We've seen Ed Miliband in a wind farm playing a ukulele. I think we know exactly what the energy strategy is going to look like. Let's go back to the Chagos Islands, because, you talked about this being discussed at UN level, an ICJ non-binding suggestion, essentially. And we also know, or also suspect, that this plays very well into China's hands. Now, my suspicion would be the one thing that China is very good at is what they say in Cantonese is guanxi, which is networking and using those networks and spheres of influence to impact on policy. We know they're good at spying. We know they're good at lobbying. We know they're good at back channels and creating international pressure and doing deals with other countries. I wonder if there might be the sort of long arm of China over the course of years involved in cajoling the ICJ to reach this decision, which all of a sudden Keir Starmer goes, yay, let's do this. Victory is flying out to Beijing, and China must be rubbing their hands together with glee, going, great, we get to have eyes on Western military.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely correct point. One of the key strategic issues of this whole deal and transferring sovereignty of the Chagos Islands is the fact that the Diego Garcia military base that we joint own with the UK and the US is situated on one of those islands. Now, there's plenty of evidence that China, over the recent years and decades, has been increasing its activity and presence in the Indian Ocean region, as you say, a crucial strategic area. And whilst it's interesting that many officials in the British government have been keen to say that Mauritius is an ally of India, the actual reality is much more complicated than that in the region. The whole region, the smaller states, are caught between Chinese and Indian tussling for influence. Mauritius was the first African country in 2019 to sign a free trade agreement with China. Huawei just got a contract to provide telecommunications. So the fact is that this is not so clear-cut. Any deal which provides an opportunity for China to build influence with the country and to transfer sovereignty over a military base to that country seems a very strange strategic move to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Marcus. Thank you ever